Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. Union Minister Ram Vilas Paswan has said that questions on parents in NPR form may be dropped. So first let us understand what is NPR. See, NPR stands for National Population Register. It is basically a register which contains the list of usual residents of the country. And who is a usual resident? A usual resident is someone who has been staying in a local area for a period of 6 months or who intends to stay in a local area for the next 6 months. So NPR is basically a registry of usual residents of the country, and this exercise is taken up under the provisions of the Citizenship Act and the citizenship rules. This law has mandated the state to identify and register the citizens of the country and provide them with a national identity card. So accordingly, the NPR exercise is carried out in order to identify the usual residents. This exercise is carried out by the Registrar General of India and the Census Commissioner of India under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and it is carried out simultaneously along with the census, which is taken up once in every 10 years. The census, which is a decennial exercise, is also carried out by the Registrar General of India and Census Commissioner of India under the Ministry of Home Affairs as per the provisions of the Census Act of 1948. Even though both NPR and census are carried out simultaneously, they both are very different from each other. See, under NPR, key demographic details of the usual residents is captured. Whereas in a census, along with demographic details, key socio-economic indicators are also captured. For example, under NPR, key demographic details such as the name of the individual, his or her date of birth and place of birth are asked. Similar demographic details with regard to one's parents and spouse is also captured. And it also captures the address of residence and the duration of stay of the usual resident. But on the other hand, during the census, apart from these questions on key demographic details, questions related to literacy, household amenities, type of housing, economic activity, etc. are also asked. So the census data will basically help the government to understand the impact of socio-economic welfare programs. So this is the reason why NPR and census are different from each other, but they are also related to each other. But over the last 2 months, the NPR which is conducted along with the census has become highly controversial because of the controversy surrounding the Citizenship Amendment Act and the proposal to conduct an All India NRC. The confusion surrounding these three policies has created a fear psychosis in the minds of large sections of the Indian population, and it has led them to believe that when these three are put together, it will become a deadly combination which could result in the systematic exclusion of large sections of the Indian society. Over the last 1 month, we have discussed in detail how these three policies put together could result in such a systematic exclusion. But the government has tried to address these fears by stating that there is no proposal to hold an All India NRC. The government has reassured that the Citizenship Amendment Act does not snatch away citizenship from Indian citizens. It only means to provide citizenship for those who are facing religious persecution in 3 neighboring countries. And now, the government is looking to address the fears surrounding NPR. See, under NPR, demographic details related to your parents could be asked. And every usual resident may not be able to provide such details related to the date of birth and place of birth of one's parents. The Union Minister has himself said that he does not know the exact date of birth of his parents. So, in order to address these concerns surrounding the demographic details of one's parents, the government has said that questions on parents in NPR might be dropped. And the government has also clarified that production of documents would not be mandatory under the NPR exercise. This might help reassure a few state governments which have opposed and stopped the NPR exercise due to these fears. Then we have another article on page number 1 related to the 2021 census. See, this ongoing census exercise will be carried out in 2 phases. In the first phase, house listing and housing census will be taken up. That is, the houses will be listed, address will be noted down, and the type of housing would also be noted down. This exercise will be carried out between April to September of this year, and this constitutes the first phase of 2021 census. Then in the second phase, population enumeration will be taken up, where questions related to demographic details and socio-economic indicators would be asked by enumerators who will go from door to door. According to this article, in the second phase of census, the option of self-enumeration would be provided through an online portal. So instead of waiting for enumerators to arrive at your doorstep, you can voluntarily provide this information and answer these questions through the online portal. So this process of self-enumeration will make the process smoother, faster, and free from errors. So this is an example for the usage of technology by Ministry of Home Affairs in order to improve the efficiency of the census exercise. In another example of technology usage, the Registrar General of India has developed an in-house mobile application which would be used by the enumerators for capturing this data. And also remember that the 2021 census would be the world's largest administrative and statistical exercise. This exercise would involve around 30 lakh enumerators who would go door to door to collect this data. The government has also allocated around 8,700 crore rupees for this exercise. And also note that all the information that you provide related to your demographic details and socioeconomic indicators has to be kept confidential according to the provisions of the Census Act of 1948. And if your confidentiality is breached or if your privacy is breached, then the responsible public officials and the enumerators can be held accountable under the Census Act of 1948. Now let's take up the next article. India wants the 30 Metre Telescope project to be shifted out of its proposed site. See, the 30 Metre Telescope is an extremely large telescope that is proposed to come up on the Mauna Kea island, which is located in the state of Hawaii of United States. The Mauna Kea island is also a dormant volcano, and it is also the highest point in the state of Hawaii. If this project is completed, it would become the world's largest visible light telescope. See, the idea of this project was initially floated in the 1980s. But the project gained momentum only in 2000 when various governments came together to take up this project as a joint venture. 4 governments in particular are formally involved in funding this project. This includes Canada, China, Japan, and India. The United States is also a part of the project, but not at the formal level. The Indian government, being one of the key sponsors of this project, has already committed $200 million in funding. It will also be providing the required technology, and India would also be manufacturing 83 out of the 492 precisely polished mirrors that are needed for the 30 Metre Telescope. This ambitious scientific project was expected to be completed by 2025, but the project has been delayed due to repeated agitations at the proposed site. This project has been opposed by the native Hawaiians and the indigenous communities of Hawaii because they consider the Mauna Kea island to be extremely sacred. So the native Hawaiians have been pressing for the project to be shifted out of this sacred island, and hence the project has been repeatedly delayed. So due to these repeated delays and repeated agitations, India wants the 30-meter telescope project to be shifted out of the Mauna Kea island, and it has made these intentions clear to the other participating countries. Then, in the same article, it has been reported that India has been holding preliminary discussions with the East Asian Observatories Consortium, which consists of 8 East Asian countries that are committed to building large telescopes by pooling their resources. Now, let us take up a column from page number 10, which evaluates the plight of Kashmiri Pandits. But first, let us understand who are Kashmiri Pandits. See, Kashmiri Pandits are basically Hindus from the Kashmir Valley, and they belong to the larger Saraswat Brahmin sect. The Kashmiri Pandits have been an ethnic minority in the Muslim dominated Kashmir Valley. And during the 19th and 20th century, Kashmiri Pandits enjoyed the royal support of the Dogra dynasty. This favorable treatment was provided during the Dogra rule not because of their religion but because of their intellect. And for centuries together, Kashmiri Pandits had lived peacefully side by side with Kashmiri Muslims, and this was a sign of communal harmony that was prevalent in the Kashmir Valley. Historically, both the communities have respected each other and lived together harmoniously. But this communal harmony was destroyed with the breakout of militancy in the Kashmir Valley. With the breakout of militancy, radical Islamic militants, with the support of Pakistan, began an ethnic cleansing campaign targeted against the Kashmiri Pandit community. Between 1985 and 1990, a few prominent Kashmiri Pandits were killed in targeted attacks carried out by radical jihadists. And on the fateful day of 19th Jan 1990, a final warning was given out to the Kashmiri Pandit community. On this day, radical jihadists broadcasted public messages warning the Kashmiri Pandits to either convert or leave the Kashmir Valley or get killed. Following this warning, a number of attacks took place against Kashmiri Pandits and a few were killed as well. So, as a result of this targeted violence, Kashmiri Pandits were forced to leave the valley in large numbers, and this is referred to as the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. According to various estimates, a few lakh Kashmiri Pandits were forced to leave the Kashmir Valley, and they essentially became IDPs or internally displaced people. So, as a result of this exodus, Kashmiri Pandits had to be rehabilitated in various parts of Jammu, Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, etc. So, those who moved out lost their property, their homes, and their livelihood. But unfortunately, successive governments till date have done very little to address this injustice. It is this plight that the writer Amitabh Mattu highlights in the column, and he also explains how the Kashmiri Pandit community has spread around the world and how they have established themselves as a successful community. Today, Kashmiri Pandits are spread around the US, Europe, Australia, etc., and they are considered as a successful community mainly because of their high rates of literacy. With regard to their religious and political ideology, they are always seen as liberal and moderate. They are also law-abiding and non-violent, and this is what enables the Kashmiri Pandit community to integrate peacefully into any society that they have settled in. The writer says that this success of the community does not mean that the historical injustice can be ignored. The writer is calling upon the government to correct this injustice by facilitating their return to the Kashmir Valley and by enabling their true rehabilitation by providing reservation and other benefits. The writer says that there are hardly around 600 families of Kashmiri Pandits left behind in the Kashmir Valley, and they lack representation in schools and colleges and as well as in government jobs. So it is the responsibility of the government to create a safe passage to facilitate their return to the Kashmir Valley and secure the presence of this minority community by providing adequate reservation and benefits. The writer says that only such policies can establish sustainable peace in Jammu and Kashmir by helping rebuild the communal harmony between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. Now let us take up another column from page number 10. The column written by Sudhindra Kulkarni evaluates the changing internal dynamics of Pakistan. See, in the 1970s, General Zia-ul Haq pursued the policy of Islamization of Pakistan during his dictatorship, and this laid the foundation for Pakistan to support extremism, radicalism, and terrorism as a state policy in order to use it as a geopolitical tool against arch rival India. The deep state of Pakistan, that is its army and the ISI, have themselves sponsored the radicalization of the Pakistani society, and they have cultivated a number of terror groups as a matter of state policy in order to use them as weapons against India. But the writer says that there are signs emerging from Pakistan which might indicate that this trend might be changing. The writer notes that the availability of funds to terror groups has reduced drastically over the years, and of late, the Pakistani armed forces have cracked down upon a number of terror groups. Then, with the establishment of the Kartarpur Sahib corridor, the deep state of Pakistan seems to be sending out a message to India that it is willing to pursue peaceful relations with India by moving away from state sponsorship of terrorism. The writer hopes that these changes are an outcome of the realization within at least few sections of the deep state of Pakistan that Pakistan has paid a heavy price for sponsoring extremism and terrorism. The writer even points out 4 key factors which might be pushing the deep state of Pakistan to adopt these changes. See, first and foremost, the Pakistani state, that is its government, its army and the ISI, realizes that terrorism has caused more internal damage than causing damage to India. Pakistan's blatant support to extremism and terrorism has resulted in the killing of thousands of civilians and soldiers, and this has brought the Pakistani society to the brink of collapse. So the writer hopes that these rising domestic challenges might be pushing the Pakistani state to change its policy towards terrorism and extremism. Then, there are international pressure factors as well, which might be pushing the Pakistani state to change its policy towards terrorism. First, we have the possibility of Pakistan being blacklisted by the Financial Action Task Force. Currently, Pakistan is on the grey list of FATF for failing to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing, and there is a very good possibility that it might be blacklisted very soon. If Pakistan is blacklisted by the FATF, then it will have a significant impact on its economy, which is already under severe stress. Then the writer points out that the influence of radicalization in Pakistan is declining due to the reduction in the availability of petrodollars. See, over the last few decades, Saudi Arabia and even UAE, which position themselves as Sunni powers, have pumped their petrodollars earned through oil exports in order to export radical Wahhabism across the world. But of late, the monarchs of Saudi Arabia and UAE have shown signs of moderation, and they have cut back on the funding for the export of radical Wahhabism. So this reduction in the availability of petrodollars has created a fund crunch for terror groups, and the simultaneous rise of Pakistan's moderate civil society has been able to reduce the influence of radicalization. And finally, the Pakistani state, which is dealing with a weak economy, has placed a lot of hopes on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The CPEC corridor of China, which is a part of its Belt and Road Initiative, is already creating modern infrastructure in Pakistan, and it is already bringing in the much needed investments. But in return for these investments, China would expect that terrorism and extremism doesn't pose a threat to the CPEC corridor. So there appears to be Chinese pressure on Pakistan to scale back its support to terror groups in order to ensure the safety and security of the CPEC corridor. So the writer says that these domestic factors and these international pressure factors might be forcing the Pakistani state to change its policy towards terrorism and extremism, and this opens up an opportunity for India. He calls upon the Indian government to capitalize upon this opportunity and jointly work towards the dismantling of the support structure that exists for terror groups and extremist groups in the region. Now let's take up an article from page number 12 which refers to India's relationship with Brazil. See, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been invited by India to be the chief guest at this year's Republic Day celebrations. During this visit, India and Brazil are expected to sign three key agreements. This includes the Strategic Action Plan, the Bilateral Investment Treaty, and the Social Security Agreement. The Strategic Action Plan will elevate the strategic partnership between India and Brazil, and it will provide for an action plan to increase cooperation in the field of defense, technology, logistics, etc. The Bilateral Investment Treaty will be the first investment treaty that the Modi government will be signing since 2015, when it had decided to scrap all the existing treaties with 83 countries, and it had brought in a new model bilateral investment treaty. So in 2015, the Modi government had scrapped all the 83 bilateral investment treaties, and it had brought in a new model BIT. So this treaty which India will be signing with Brazil is based on this model BIT, and this would be the first bilateral investment treaty that India would be signing since 2015. Next, India and Brazil would also exchange the Social Security Agreement, which was signed earlier in 2017. This agreement will basically allow the pension funds of both the countries to be used for making investments in the other country. But apart from these areas of cooperation, there are few areas of conflict as well. For example, it would be interesting to watch the interaction between Prime Minister Modi and President Bolsonaro on the topic of climate change. Even though both the leaders belong to right-wing political ideology, they differ in their approach towards climate change. Prime Minister Modi has launched a number of ambitious initiatives to tackle climate change and global warming. He has repeatedly said that tackling climate change is a priority for his government. But on the other hand, Jair Bolsonaro is a climate skeptic and he does not believe in climate change, and he has even rejected all the scientific studies that have proven climate change. So this brings the priorities of Prime Minister Modi in direct conflict with the priorities of Jair Bolsonaro. And another area of conflict would be the issue of agricultural subsidies at the WTO. Recently, Brazil has lodged a complaint against India at the WTO in which it has challenged the subsidies that the Indian government provides for sugarcane farmers. Now let's take up another article from page number 12. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Oli has said that the pending border dispute at Kalapani should be resolved through peaceful negotiations. He has made this statement while both the Prime Ministers inaugurated an integrated check post via an online video link. This integrated check post has been built along the India-Nepal border at Jogbani and Biratnagar. This has been built with Indian assistance in order to facilitate cross-border trade. So after inaugurating this integrated check post, Nepal's Prime Minister has said that the border dispute at Kalapani should be resolved through peaceful negotiations. See, this is where Kalapani is located. It is located along the India-Nepal border in Uttarakhand. And this dispute traces its origin to the Treaty of Sugauli, which was signed between the British government and the Nepal kingdom. But post-independence, the Kalapani dispute had become dormant due to the friendly relations between the two countries. But this border dispute has been reignited in 2019 after India published a new political map in which India has claimed sovereignty over Kalapani. So the publication of this map by India has reignited this border dispute, and hence Nepal's Prime Minister has said that the time has come to resolve all pending issues, including the border dispute, through peaceful negotiations. During this online interaction, Nepal's Prime Minister has thanked Prime Minister Modi for the large scale assistance that India provided for Nepal during the 2015 earthquake. This earthquake had caused enormous damage to Nepal, and immediately India had launched Operation Maitri in order to provide for search and rescue relief. And India had even provided long term financial assistance to help rebuild the damaged houses and infrastructure. Recently, some of these houses and infrastructure projects have been completed, and hence Nepal's Prime Minister has thanked India for the disaster assistance that India provided after the 2015 earthquake. Now let us take up the practice questions. A set of rules outlining the norms, rules and responsibilities and proper practices of an individual is known as the code of conduct. Option B is the right answer. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 13. According to this article, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court is studying whether it is possible to enforce a new code of conduct if it is framed for central and state ministers. See, a code of conduct serves as a guideline for regulating the behavior and conduct of individuals. Such a code of conduct is very essential for those who hold a public office, and right now, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court is considering whether it should direct the government to come out with a code of conduct that would apply for central and state ministers. It is also studying whether the code of conduct should be made enforceable. Now let us take up the second practice question. What does Project 75I refer to? The correct answer is option C. It refers to a submarine project of the Indian Navy. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 12. According to this article, the Defence Acquisition Council, which is chaired by the Defence Minister, has selected Mazgaon Dock Limited and L&T as the Indian partners for Project 75I. See, Project 75I is a follow-up project for Project 75. Under Project 75, India had built 6 Scorpene submarines by acquiring technology from France, and these submarines belong to the Kalapani class. Right now, Project 75I has been initiated, which is a follow-up to the earlier project, and under this new project, India is looking to build 6 additional diesel-electric submarines with air-independent propulsion technology. This technology will help the submarines to increase the duration of their submergence, and it will also increase their operational range. Now let us take up the third practice question. The power to disqualify MLAs on the grounds of defection has been vested with the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. Option B is the correct answer. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 12. According to this article, the Supreme Court has directed the Parliament to amend the 10th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which is referred to as the Anti-Defection Law. The Supreme Court has directed the Parliament to strip the exclusive powers of the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly while deciding on matters of disqualification on the grounds of defection. The Supreme Court is of the opinion that speakers generally misuse their powers while deciding upon disqualification under the 10th schedule. So the Supreme Court has favored the establishment of an independent quasi-judicial authority to decide upon matters of disqualification of MLAs on the ground of defection. Now let us take up a map-based question. The latest coronavirus outbreak is believed to have emerged in which city? The correct answer is option C. It is believed to have emerged in Wuhan, which is located in China. This question has been asked because we have two related articles on page number 9 and page number 14. but we have discussed the topic of coronavirus in detail in our yesterday's analysis. So kindly go through yesterday's video for further details. And according to these two articles, the outbreak of coronavirus was most likely reported in Wuhan in China. From here, the deadly virus has spread rapidly to Thailand, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, etc. And the World Health Organization is going to decide today whether to declare the outbreak as an international public health emergency. Now let us take up a practice question from the 2019 prelims paper. Consider the following statements. The Environment Protection Act of 1986 empowers the Government of India to state the requirement of public participation in the process of environmental protection and the procedure and manner in which it is sought. The first statement is incorrect because the Environment Protection Act does not contain any provision related to public participation. The second statement says that the Environment Protection Act of 1986 empowers the Government of India to lay down the standards for emission or discharge of environmental pollutants from various sources. This statement is correct. So the correct answer is option B, 2 only. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, write a note on the border dispute between India and Nepal. The second question, Pakistan's mindset on terrorism seems to be changing due to domestic challenges and international pressure. Comment. So kindly write an answer to these questions and post them in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.